Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session focuses on grammar translation method, opportunities, and threats. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to evaluate or judge the threats and opportunities related to GTM. Well, when it comes to the use of grammar translation method, students and educators alike often describe grammar translation method as inefficient, incompetent, and tedious. It is inefficient in the sense that it is not adequate enough to give the required communicative skills to the students. Incompetent in the sense that it does not match the needs of the students. It does not cater for the needs of the students. It does not provide them the communicative tools that they need. And tedious in the sense that because language is taught through the root of rules, which is very much unlike how we learn L1, so it becomes a tedious job to learn L2 or to learn the target language. Now, what is the consequence of all this? When people believe in it like that, when students, the learners, when the teachers, the practitioners, when they believe in it that way, what is the consequence? One of the consequences is that it does not sound very motivating for a learner. And for that matter, it does not sound trustworthy for a teacher. So lack of trust, lack of faith, lack of belief in the method is one of the consequences, which is a potential threat, I would say, when it comes to use it in a class, because neither the teacher feels confident about the use of it, nor the student feels comfortable with the use of it. So this becomes a huge threat. The mainstay of classroom materials for the grammar translation method is the textbook. It is, again, the textbook is a collection of stories or poems or other kinds of extracts from literary texts. Textbooks in the 19th century attempted to codify the grammar of the target language into discrete rules for students to learn and memorize. So the purpose of these books is not to introduce, though the grammar translation method aims at enabling the learners to read the literature of target language, but the way it is codified is that the grammar of the target language is presented there in the form of discrete rules where the students have to learn, they have to memorize how these rules are operating or how they are working. So a typical chapter in our typical grammar translation textbook would begin with the bilingual vocabulary list, where there would be a set of important words or selected words from the text, from the target language, and their meanings or their equivalents in the other language, L1, would be given there. After which there would be grammar rules for students to study and sentences for them to translate or to dissect. So if you look at this example that I have given on the slide for you, this is a typical sentence from 19th century textbook. The philosopher pulled the lower jaw of the hen. Now, if you look at the grammatical structure of the sentence, if you look at the syntactic aspects of the sentence, grammatically the sentence is correct. It has no flaw. It has perfect grammar. But when it comes to making sense of the sentence, the philosopher pulled the lower jaw of the hen. It does not make any sense. The lower jaw and then of the hen. And the philosopher is pulling that. Why has the philosopher to do that? What about the jaw of the hen, where it is? So it does not make sense. So, you know, the communicative aspect is completely nullified, and the dead grammatical rules, I would say, are learned and they are crammed. So grammar is at the forefront of this language learning method, and grammatical analysis, morphology, and syntax are closely studied, and students are drilled over and over again to use these rules. Classes are, of course, conducted in the student's native tongue. Classes are, of course, conducted. Now, this is very interesting. Target language that is to be taught, that is not the medium of instruction. The instruction is given in L1. Another, go-to material of the grammar translation method is the notorious vocabulary word list. This is another problem which creates a potential threat of its use in the classroom, and the teachers do not find themselves very much comfortable with that. At least in today's world, they don't find it, because a vocabulary list is given, and we all know what it looks like. One column of words are written in the target language, the other column of words is written in L1, and the is equal to mark is put between the words. So a word is given in English with an is equal to mark, and then its equivalent in Urdu is given, and the students have to, match and have to memorize those word lists. So, the focus is more on memorizing. This is one of the threats. As far as the opportunities or the scope is concerned, the method by definition has a very limited scope, because speaking or any kind of spontaneous creative output is missing both from the textbooks and from the curriculum, as well as students often fail at speaking when it comes to speaking, or even letter writing when it comes to communicative writing. When they're given a task to write, for example, a simple letter to a friend or something like that, they fail in performing. Why? Because they have just learned the rules. They have not learned how to use it in the communicative context. Balson, who was a student of Plott's, a major proponent of this method in the 19th century, asserts, in commenting about writing letters or speaking, he said he would be overcome with a veritable forest of paragraphs and an impenetrable thicket of grammatical rules. So what, if you ask a student to write a letter, what he would or she would produce would be a huge collection of thick vocabulary, grammatical rules, and loads of paragraphs. But making sense, making meaning in the real life context, this is what would be absent. So grammar translation method has been rejected as a legitimate language teaching method by many scholars, especially the modern scholars do not favor it. It is a method for which there is no theory as such behind this. There is no literature that offers a rationale or justification for it, or that attempts to relate it to the issues in linguistics, in psychology, or in educational theory in today's teaching and learning context of language. It would really be very difficult for students to make serious headway with any language using any technique or method if they did not first, at the very least, have a basic vocabulary on which to build. So this method just provides them lists of vocabularies, but how to use those lists in practical life is missing. Granted, the presentation of vocabulary can do with some major overhauls from the olden days. Instead of a dry word list, vocabulary can be presented with pictures of the actual objects in full colors. So when it comes to the opportunities of utilizing it, still in the contexts where there are possibilities of using it, or the teachers feel confident to use it, probably instead of giving dry lists of vocabulary, these lists should accompany some context, even if the context is only visual, that is in the form of pictures. The good thing about grammar rules is that they can be applied to a whole array of contexts and situations. So once a learner learns a rule, there are huge opportunities of applying that rule again and again in different contexts. The only thing that is needed is to give the students some drill or some training in how to exploit that particular rule in different contexts or lifelike situations. So one thing you can do, for example, is to give your students a cheat sheet or grammar rules according to the topic, and then you can set a context for them where you can ask them to apply those rules. It supports that all-important reading skill, which is, again, one of the opportunities, because it involves reading of the target language, so it can be used as an opportunity. But it accompanies a lot of threats as well. One of the threats is that it demotivates the learners because it is boring, because it is only based on rules, because it is only based on isolated mechanical grammatical exercises to learn accurate forms. So the students do not feel interested. As far as the opportunities are concerned, it gives the students opportunities to read classical literature and have some knowledge of the history of those countries. Besides, it provides translation practice as well. So, it has its own opportunities, it has its own threats, it has its own weaknesses, it has its own strengths. It totally depends upon how it is used. Probably a good way of using it is in combination with some other methods.